November 1883. A forest of thorn and dry grass in Kordofan, Sudan. An army of 10,000 men has been walking in circles for 3 days. They are almost out of water. They are almost out of ammunition. And in the next few hours, almost none of them will leave this forest alive. This is the largest force Egypt has sent against the rebellion so far. By nightfall, it will simply stop existing. To understand how 10,000 men disappeared in a forest nobody had ever heard of, we have to go back 5 months, to a governor under pressure, a retired colonel with something to prove, and guides nobody should have trusted. By the summer of 1883, the man calling himself the Mahdi had already taken El Obeid, the capital of Kordofan, after a 6-month siege that starved the garrison into surrender. He had already destroyed one Egyptian force sent against him. Now he controlled the province outright, and every week that passed without a response let the rebellion harden into something closer to a state. In Cairo, the governor of Sudan, Raouf Pasha, needed to reverse it. Fast.
El Obeid is lost. If we don't retake it, that Egypt can hold Sudan at all.
Then send the army you have.
The army I have hasn't been paid in months, half against us 2 years ago.
I don't care what they did.
The man Raouf Pasha placed in command was William Hicks, a retired British colonel, experienced in India, experienced in Abyssinia too, but never in this kind of country, and never with a force like this one. His army was not an army so much as a collection of problems wearing uniforms. Thousands of soldiers freed from prison after fighting against their own government 2 years earlier. Unpaid, undisciplined. Marching south with men who, by any reasonable measure, did not want to be there. Hicks knew exactly what he'd been handed. In a telegram before the expedition even left, he suggested it might be wiser to simply wait. Let Kordofan, in his words, settle itself.
These men have no reason to die for Egypt. Half of them were fighting Egypt 18 months ago. Waiting a season costs us nothing.
Cairo did not want to wait. He didn't get either. What he got was an order to march to El Obeid, break the siege, and crush the rebellion before it reached Khartoum itself. In September 1883, Hicks marched south. Roughly 8,000 infantry, 1,000 cavalry, 14 cannon, 6 machine guns. On paper, an overwhelming force. In practice, an army that had never trained together, led by officers most of the men had never met, walking into terrain none of them understood. And from the very first week, there was a problem nobody wanted to say out loud.
The guides took us in a circle today. We covered ground we already crossed yesterday. Guides get lost. It happens. 3 times in a week?
The guides were local men. Some genuinely lost. Others, quite possibly, were not. Nobody could prove it, and Hicks, boxed in by his own orders, had no choice but to keep trusting men he was no longer sure he could trust. By early November, the column reached a forest near a place called Shaykan. Dense scrub, narrow visibility, the kind of ground where an army loses the one advantage it actually has, the ability to see its enemy coming. If Hicks had an answer, he kept it to himself. He gave the order to keep moving.
This isn't the road we were told about. It's the road we were given. Was this the best route, or did they walk us into this on purpose?
What he didn't know was that the Mahdi's forces, now numbering in the tens of thousands, had known exactly where this column was for days. They didn't need an ambush, they just needed to let exhaustion, heat, and thirst do half the work first. On the night of November 3rd, the column formed a Zariba, a defensive ring of cut thorn bushes, the standard camp formation for a force that expects trouble. Trouble found them before dawn. Riflemen firing from inside the scrub, invisible in the dense brush. Not a single decisive charge, a grinding, exhausting pressure that never fully stopped and never fully committed either. For 2 more days, the column pushed forward through the same forest, fighting the same invisible enemy, drinking the last of their water and burning through ammunition they had no way to resupply. Men who had marched south unpaid and unwilling began to understand exactly how alone they were. By November 5th, the column had nothing left to give. No water, barely any ammunition, men who could no longer tell which direction led back to anywhere. What was left would not hold long. The modest forces, tens of thousands strong against a column that had been bleeding for 3 days straight, finally closed in completely. There was no formation left to break. There was barely a line left to hold. Hicks was killed on the field, along with nearly every European officer who rode with him. 2 war correspondents traveling with the column, Frank Visitelli and Edmund O'Donovan, died there too, among the first journalists in history killed covering a story that never made it home in time to be told. Of the roughly 10,000 men who marched out of Khartoum that September, historians estimate somewhere between 300 and 500 made it back alive. An entire army, erased in a forest most of the world had never heard of over the course of 3 days. News of the disaster reached Khartoum before it reached Cairo, and Cairo before it reached London.
General Hicks is killed. The entire force is destroyed. There are only a few survivors. God help us in this dark hour.
The message was the same everywhere it landed. Sudan was not going to be saved by half measures. Within months, Britain would send its own man to manage what was left. A general with a reputation for fearlessness and faith in equal measure. His name was Charles Gordon. And what happened to him in that city is a story we have already told. If you have not seen it yet, go watch it now.